ES Audio.
From the Evening Standard in London, I'm Mark Blunden, and this is The Leader.
There's a starman waiting in the sky. He'd like to come and meet us, but he thinks
David Bowie was a global Londoner, and his legacy lives on with a new celebration at the BFI on the Southbank, with a month-long show called The Starman and the Silver Screen. Now, the Brixton-born star has posthumously earned his estate what's reported to be about £185 million, and he joins the likes of Bruce Springsteen and Tina Turner among the artists selling the rights to their back catalogues for hundreds of millions. But why? How does it work? And is there anything in all this for younger artists? To answer these questions and more, we're joined by the Evening Standard City editor Oscar Williams-Groot. So what's this huge Bowie deal all about?
Warner Chappell Music have acquired the back catalogue, the publishing rights for all of Bowie's works across his career. So all of his albums and major hits, things like Changes, Ziggy Stardust, all the songs that we would know, they now are under the control of Warner Chappell Music, which is a company associated with Warner Music, the record label. It's reported to be around $250 million.
And so why are these companies snapping up these music rights?
They're companies that are formed to own and manage music rights. So their business will just be dealing with the royalty income and the distribution and management of these back catalogues, which, you know, maybe wind the clock back 30 years ago, it would have been a cottage industry. It would have been something that the music labels would have done just within a small department. But now it's big enough that it warrants a whole company to administer it. And that's because the nature of royalties has changed. In the past, you would make most of your income as an artist from either album sales or touring, or a combination of the two. Royalties would actually be a relatively smaller part of your income that would come from things if it was used in a movie or if it was used in a commercial, a song that you were involved in. Nowadays, people rent music, they don't buy it. So rather than buying an album, they will stream it over Spotify or Apple Music or another platform. And that means you get a regular stream of royalties, a small trickle of income. Now, for the bigger artists, people like David Bowie or the Rolling Stones or Bob Dylan, all these sorts of people who've been selling their back catalogues, those trickles of income are actually pretty big. And so it makes sense to have somebody to put them all together and manage them.
Presumably this is more for music dinosaurs to make some money. How about younger artists?
What we've seen is the activity is concentrated among the older artists with bigger profiles. That's because of something in the music industry called decay, which is after songs are published, you get the royalty income slowly decays over a period of about 10 years. And then it tends to settle at a level where you can probably predict how much it's going to earn every year. So, for something like Stevie Wonder's Happy Birthday might be a good example, a song that's relatively well known. It's probably got a pretty predictable profile of how much it's going to earn each year because it's been going since the 70s and there's a good track record. For something like Watermelon Sugar by Harry Styles, it's a huge hit now, but who knows how many people are going to be listening to it on a yearly basis in 10 years' time. Nothing against Harry Styles, it's just impossible to predict, which means it's then very hard to value as a result. So that's why we tend to see people going for the older catalogues, because they're more predictable in terms of what they'll earn.
But isn't this the ultimate sellout?
In many ways, you could see this as a counterpoint to the sort of streaming backlash. So there was a lot of anger for a long time about the fact that streaming would only deliver a trickle of the income that you might get before from album sales. Because the benefit from album sales is if you were a band, you would typically get the lump sum of what you would earn from your music in the first year. You release the album and everybody who wants to buy it will probably buy it in that first year, so you get a nice check, and then you can use that to sit back and think about what you're going to be doing for your next record and relax a little bit or invest it or whatever you want to do. But then that turned into, that profile was over 20, 30, 40 years, and so it becomes very hard to make a living. Now, if you sell the royalties up front, you're actually mimicking the profile that you had with album sales. I don't think it's selling out. It's more a return to the way people were paid in the past. Although, having said all that, it's generally the older established artists who are reaping these benefits rather than the smaller, newer, emerging artists.
Of course, Bowie was way ahead of his time with what were dubbed Bowie bonds back in the 90s. What can you tell us about that?
That was actually a very early example of people looking at music income and trying to blend it with the worlds of high finance. David Bowie essentially, he was a pioneer of investing in music. He got together with an investment bank in the 1990s and said, look, I've got a back catalogue that earns me a predictable income. Why don't I sell the rights to that income over the next 20 years? And then he sold them in bonds, which would pay out a sort of predictable amount or broadly predictable amount. And he sold them in 1997. Not only was he a pioneer, he was also a genius in terms of timing, because he got a big lump sum selling the bonds for these future royalties just before royalties tended to fall off a cliff because of the advent of Napster and that boom in stealing music instead of buying it. So really, he was very prescient.
What does the future look like for new young artists? What's their future revenue stream?
Back in the old days, new artists would emerge, a record company would sign them, the A&R man would see them at a pub and sign them up. And then it was up to the record company to promote them by getting their record onto the radio and putting it at the biggest clubs and those sorts of things. And they would actively work to try and do that. Actually, that's what a lot of most major record labels are doing today, but with TikTok, with Peloton, with all these sorts of things. So rather than just sending it to Radio 1 as they used to do, now they'll approach TikTok and say, oh, we've got this up and coming artist. Maybe you want to feature them in a clip, or is there some way we can work together on some sort of collaboration? Similarly with Peloton, and also with things like Netflix series or popular streaming shows with games. There's all these ways of seeding music to try and get it to take off.
There's more news and features in the Evening Standard newspaper and online at standard.co.uk. That's The Leader. We're back on Thursday at 4 p.m.